Hello and welcome to Move the Line, presented by 4for4 Bets. I'm Ryan Noonan, excited to be back in this chair to discuss all of the recent NFL news, first wave of free agency, and all the rumors that are impacting the NFL draft betting markets. Excited to unpack it all with my really smart friends. We're missing one. He'll be here soon. Joining me here as always, Connor Allen. What's going on, buddy?
Not a whole lot. It's great to be out of the hosting chair. It was fun for one episode, but I'm not sure that I'd want to take on the reins there full time. At the same time, March Madness is in full swing, so we moved the show up to today instead. I think it's probably a smart move here because I'm going to be fully deep in the engagement farming of March Madness and already have been. So not much more I want to do with that after today.
Catches strays in the chat from Himothy. It wasn't me, man. I was ready to go. I was here early. We're waiting on Scott. Obviously, Scott is Scott's on the road. He's an MMA trainer on the side. He's in Vegas. I think he's trying to set up shop in a book right now. So Scott will hop in. But I wasn't here last week for the debut of our guy. I mean, there is no one better in the space to talk about draft betting, regardless of whatever the sport is. I don't know anyone that spends more time grinding this stuff than the man himself. Vegas Refund VR. What's going on, my brother?
Thanks for having me. I mean, we've definitely had some news the last couple of days, and what Connor's fully indulged in March Madness. I hope they post some new draft props so we can scoop those up while everyone else is distracted.
Look, Connor's not even like engaged in March Madness. Connor's engaged in engagement farming, right? So like this is it feeds the beast. You know, it pops out the thread starts to do fire. All of a sudden, Connor's like, well, I got to put out another thread. And look, dude, no one does it better than Connor. I'm not hating. It's just he's not plugged into March Madness. Let's call it what it is. He's plugged into the NFL draft. He's just trying to get those likes and it's working for him, man. He's good at it.
You know how sad it is that my most popular tweet ever is a March Madness thread? I mean, that's just it's honestly kind of embarrassing, but whatever is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, whatever it does, it pays the bills. So yeah, Scott will join us, I'm sure, at some point here with some other insight. Like you said, lots of stuff has shifted. We've had a couple of, I think, impactful mock drafts come out with Mel Kiper Jr., with Daniel Jeremiah, both with new drafts yesterday. I think those are interesting inflection points, especially after the first wave. We're obviously still in, free agency's first wave-ish, but I think the most stuff is settled, some of the big stuff, and maybe shape some positional needs and things like that. So we're going to continue to be here at least once per week on the 4for4 Bets YouTube channel. Subscribe, likes, rate, and reviews, podcasts as well, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe as well. We appreciate all those things. Scoop up the betting subscription if you want to get access to all that we're doing at 4for4, including all of the bets. You want to get into Discord, get all the plays. We start to push those plays out. Take advantage of that as well. 4for4.com/plans. We also have some pro days today. We have Ohio State pro day. We have USC pro day. So looks like we're not going to get anything from Marvin Harrison Jr., which again, what an alpha move. Like, I don't think he's doing anything. Like,
we have to talk about
very
that,
interesting.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it. Right? Kind of free flowing at this point. Like, he kind of said that was what he was going to do at the combine. But look, I put up tape. I put up baller tape for years. You know my daddy. You know what I could do. Like, should I be doing anything? Does he really give a rip that everyone thinks, hey, maybe this is closer between Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and Marvin Harrison Jr.? He's like, look, someone's going to pick me. Someone's going to get a winner. What do you make of that, VR? Like, do you think that impacts anything with where he's at? Or do you – I guess I'll reframe it as, do you believe any of the smoke around him not being wide receiver one?
No. I mean, people were kind of hating on him not interviewing because he just basically didn't show up, which it's fine. Probably could have let them know he wasn't going to come, but I mean, he has really nothing to gain and everything to lose by going to a pro day, I suppose, which even if he ran the 4.5s, he'd still be fine. And there's just nothing to gain really. And if there is anything to lose, it would be that or risking an injury. I mean, he has nothing to prove at this point. So why even do anything? I totally get it. And if it was anyone else, I would totally understand the criticism. I mean, Caleb was getting criticism for not doing anything. And he's locked into number one. Marvin Harrison is locked into being the first wide receiver. I mean, I think it's just they have nothing better to talk about other than Neighbors, I guess, being a potentially wide receiver one. And I forget who I saw. It was either a tweet or someone brought it up. It was like a coordinated effort between a lot of the main guys in the media hyping Neighbors yesterday. And then you see Jeremiah didn't even have Neighbors ahead of Marvin in his mock yesterday. So I'm not reading into it. I mean, even if there was anything to read into, he's still going to go where he's going. So nothing to bet off of it whatsoever.
Yeah, Connor, to me, this more so than anything, we touch on it as a term used. This to me, like first wave post free agency, pro day stuff. This is silly season to me. This is agents. This is like when we start to get things fed a little bit where it's, you have to be real careful in deciphering what is coming out. So, currently out in the betting markets right now, Marvin Harrison Jr. minus 750 on FanDuel to be the first receiver. If you happen to have an appetite for Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, Neighbors plus 550, 22-1 on Odunze there. Any thoughts there to expand on VR's point?
I was trying to figure out ways in which Neighbors would go ahead of Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Like in what scenario would that happen? And I think the very unique scenario in which case it would happen would be the Cardinals trade out of 4 and they go back and, where JJ McCarthy goes 4 basically. So then you're sitting at 5 with the Chargers. I still think that the Chargers would probably pick Marvin Harrison Jr. or trade the pick to someone who picks Marvin Harrison Jr. because no one's going to trade up to 5. I mean, to pick Malik Neighbors, it would require the Chargers standing pat and picking Malik Neighbors over Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, I don't know. To me, it seems like the current price of 5-1 seems way too short for the likelihood of all that happening because all we've heard from Cardinals camp is like they absolutely love Marvin Harrison Jr. So it's been like nonstop before the draft, before the combine, like from day one. So I'm going to kind of stick with that. I would love for the price of Marvin Harrison Jr. to be the first-round quarterback to be drafted to get shorter and shorter because I would definitely lay some juice on that, to be honest, but not at minus 650, which is what we're looking at right now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we also have to remember like these front offices, like they're trying to keep their job and there is really no risk. If you've identified that a receiver is in need, there is no risk in going with Marvin Harrison Jr. Like he's going to pan out regardless, unless he has some sort of injury. Like you need to not get too cute as well. And it feels like that would be a little too cute at this point. So yeah, some of the other news that we've had in the last couple of days, I'd love to get your thoughts and we can kind of go back to running through the top 10. I think there's a trade with the Vikings and the Texans. I believe that happened right after you guys recorded last week where the Texans traded out of their first round pick. The Vikings now have ammo at 11 and 23 to possibly make a trade up into the top 5. Maybe getting into the top 3 is a little bit difficult, VR. I'd love to get your thoughts there. I don't know that New England's super excited about trading down. We could touch on that too, but I think we don't always love trades in mock drafts, but it becomes really hard to not kind of find a way to have Minnesota moving up to address the quarterback position. What are your thoughts on the trade, or how do you kind of see Minnesota approaching this move into the top 5?
Yeah, I would say this was one of a couple things that happened since the last time we were on, but I can't remember a time that there was like basically a certainty on the Vikings trading up. I mean, if you follow that guy Crack Rock, which love Crack Rock, he is pumping JJ to the Vikings, and he panned out a lot last year. And I mean, honestly, if you read his context, like you can't make paragraphs worth of things up like he is, but figuring out where the trade is. And I think it really comes down to like the closer we get to the draft, the more likely it is to be like the Cardinals or the Chargers, because you're not going to trade to 4 or 5 right now and leave yourself exposed for someone trading ahead of you, where that's something you could do draft day with less of a risk for someone to jump up ahead of you. And then if it is like, let's say the Patriots, like that could be a move that would happen sooner rather than later. But I think the closer we get to the draft, a week out, day of, then we're looking at the Cardinals or Chargers being the trade candidate for the Vikings. And at this point, it feels like it's going to happen. It's just when will it happen? And if it happens, I would love for it to happen now so that we can stop just debating and get on to other things. It would be probably the Cardinals. Actually, the closer we get, it would be probably the Chargers. And if it goes now, it would probably be the Cardinals because you're guaranteed into one of the top 4. So
yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly, Connor. I mean, that you can't make that move right now to the Chargers because then you just risk someone jumping you with the Cardinals. So that has to wait. But what are your thoughts? I mean, New England, any moves on New England? Very interesting to see. I guess we can kind of go back to the top 5 as well. Both the Kuiper and Jeremiah mocks yesterday had Drake May at 2. New England seems to not be super interested in moving off of there. So talk to me however you want about the top 5.
Well, if we want to go back to our guy Crack Rock, he basically said, per Robert Kraft, which is hilarious.
I love it. Was he at Mar-a-Lago? Because a lot of the Crack Rock stuff is coming from just dining in Mar-a-Lago. It sounds like, which is also
apparently
I love that layer to this whole thing. Is that some of this is just hearsay from Mar-a-Lago.
2024 is the year of Pretty Ricky and Crack Rock. That's all I got to say.
Pretty Ricky got shut down, didn't he?
I know. Rest in peace. Rest in peace. It was a glorious free agency for a week. Noonan didn't even know he was VR. I literally told him, I was like, because Noonan was on vacation for like 4 days, and that was the whole lifespan of Pretty Ricky. I was like, dude, this guy was a legend for like 3 days. 0 to 25,000 followers in like a week.
Nuts.
It was unreal.
But yeah, okay. Yeah, back to the top 5. So per Crack Rock, per Robert Kraft, the Patriots are going to pick one of the 2 quarterbacks. I've heard some that as well from other places as well, that they have similar grades. They're going to pick whichever one's left. I personally still think I have no idea who's going to be at 2. I think there was some signaling that it could be Jaden with the signing of Mariota. There's also some signaling that they were trying to sign Sam Darnold. It's like, I don't know whether that makes sense there as well specifically. I'm kind of just keeping an open mind to that, but I am pretty confident that the Patriots will not trade down and pick a quarterback at 3. So in this point, like the closer we get, like VR said, like I think JJ McCarthy to 5 makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering like at what point it's worth just like playing it for a reasonable amount anyways. We'll get plus 450 at Caesars and FanDuel right now for JJ McCarthy to 5. I think it's almost like a certainty that he's going 4 or 5. But I guess the only way that you get screwed is like if the Patriots do somehow trade down, and then if the Giants don't trade up, and because they wouldn't have a reason to probably at that point. They would just sit there and probably take McCarthy, but maybe not. We don't even know that for sure. So that's, I think, the downside there.
At first, it kind of felt like the Pats were going to be the trade partner when that Vikings trade happened at first, and it just made more sense for them to be. But then you listen to Jeremiah on a couple of the podcasts he was on, and he was harping that the Patriots are like the least likely or least willing team to trade out. And if anything, it would be more the Commanders to trade out, which would just cost probably too much.
Oh, insane.
So yeah, I think it remains probably the Cardinals or the Chargers. And I was pretty confident that it was going to be Jaden. And if you listen to Nick Costos podcast daily, You Better You Bet, he had Ron Rivera on, I want to say last week. And Ron Rivera was kind of going into how it's going to be Jayden Daniels at 2. And it really wasn't about what he was saying, which was, of course, interesting. It was like how he was saying it. It was like there was so much conviction, which you don't hear conviction out of, I guess, someone in the media like he had, that he knew the answer. Like he knew it was going to be Jaden. And I thought that was definitely worth something. And Jaden's odds are, I think, all the way up to minus 180 right now. But then you had Jeremiah and Kuiper, which how much we're valuing Kuiper, I think is worth something, but not nearly as much as Jeremiah still having Drake. And I don't know if they've had Drake since the start and they really haven't had anything worth swaying them. And they're just going to stick to the guns until they have some sort of intel or what. But them still having Drake at 2 yesterday was pretty interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting for sure. I mean, and that's the silly season part of it too, is that these big media mouthpieces can be used by GMs to kind of float whatever they want out there too. So it is an interesting thing to see and as the next couple of weeks kind of shape up. But yeah, some of the other bigger news that came out, I guess, free agency stuff and some stuff that happened yesterday too. The Jets at 10, I think, have been really interesting. They were like minus 300 to take an offensive lineman a couple of weeks ago, and now have added 3 free agent offensive linemen in the last couple of days. John Simpson played basically every snap at left guard last year for the Ravens. his teammate Morgan Moses, also a right tackle, kind of fits a need. And then they went out and made a splash with Tyron Smith. Now, these are all like cheapish 1-year deals. That's kind of within the window of what they're operating in too, right? We are hearing from Aaron Rodgers that he wants to play multiple seasons, but they kind of are in a win now mode and mentality. And they kind of did the same thing yesterday with Mike Williams. Kind of the other positional need is they need pass catchers, because right now you're looking at Alan Lazard as wide receiver too. So like they need to make some changes there as well.
They got Mike Will though. They got Mike Will.
That's what I say, Mike Williams. But short-term deal, right? Like similar as the offensive lineman. What do you go ahead and do? Because now it's like, does it shift to Brock Bowers? What are you thinking there, Connor, with what the Jets are doing at 10? It's obviously offensive lineman not off the table, but probably less of a win now.
I mean,
move.
They should trade number 10 for like Brandon Ayuk or something like that. I mean, they should just trade it away and get another player. Like whoever they draft is not going to be ready enough, barring you get like an Adunza neighbor, something like that, like at 10. I mean, maybe Bowers. I mean, I don't know. I think that it depends on how they view the whole tight end in the first round situation. I think Laporta helped kind of break that mold last year with what we saw from him. So that could be interesting, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what Rodgers wants to do. So I don't know. I would not be surprised if they go with like a Bowers here, like if he really likes him or something like that. But again, it's just like so subjective. I feel like the Jets are just going to be able to just do whatever Rodgers wants, which is obviously not going to be the most of the time.
Yeah, those odds have shifted a little bit. DraftKings now, first position for the Jets, tight end plus 125, offensive lineman plus 175, wide receiver plus 275, which is interesting. Any thoughts there, VR?
Yeah, I mean, 10 is kind of like the worst spot in the first round, honestly, where like after 9 is really a drop off if you're including JJ McCarthy now, where I could get like, I think if they stay at 10, it's going to be Bowers. Like I got a notification that when they signed whoever it was, and I hopped on Bowers before they could pull it. It was fantastic because you just see the fake CLV, but receiver was like favored as well with tight end, and you just couldn't figure out like who would they draft a wide receiver at 10, because the big 3 are going to be gone. They're not going to reach. It would be crazy for them to reach for Thomas, and Bowers just made the most sense. And like I said, I hate talking trades, and Douglas hasn't really been very aggressive, I don't think, trading since he's been the GM. But like if they're at 10 right now with Mike Will, Bowers is like kind of the only option that makes sense. But they're going to draft a tackle and sit him their first year. It would be like the most just thing to do to do that. But like they're all in. Like everyone is on 1 to 2 year deals that they're signing because of the Aaron Rodgers effect. And Bowers does feel like Bowers feels more ready than someone like Laporta that went last year. And they need help because Mike Will is off of an ACL. Like, I don't know if Mike Williams really feels like that they're not going to have interest, because dude's always hurt. I mean, it's
constantly. Yeah, anytime he goes down.
But 10 is just that awkward spot because like there really is just a drop off in terms of like the bona fide talent with JJ McCarthy in the top 10 now. It really 10 is that fall off for me.
Yeah. It might be early for Brian Thomas. I wouldn't hate it though necessarily. I mean, I think he was a lot closer to Neighbors, and I think he, based off of like production at LSU, and then he went and showed up pretty well at the combine, like size speed combo for Thomas. I know that hasn't been where he's been mocked early in the process, so from what we're plugged into, it would kind of feel like a stretch, but like maybe from their standpoint, maybe it wouldn't necessarily, because again, like you can't feel super solid about Mike Will being ready necessarily for day one or being able to last through the entirety of the season, because then all of a sudden you get into a depth issue. It becomes really problematic at key positions. And
it's crazy that Jamar Chase, one of the top 5 the year he went, and then you had Justin Jefferson go in the 20s, which is really like the ranges for Neighbors and Thomas right now, which is wild. But
yeah, it's an interesting class. And again, like how do you approach the depth of both of those positions as well, knowing that you can possibly add someone in round 2? Where's that teardrop on teams' boards and such, that those things are pretty interesting to me. Some of the other stuff, Connor, and you can jump in and take it anywhere you want, but I want to get your guys' thoughts. This is some of the interesting news that I think has come out of both of the mock drafts, is that discussion around QB5 or QB6, because both Kuiper and DJ had another quarterback in their first round, the quarterback is totally different. It is not, it's a situation where like, yeah, you could plop a guy at 12 in a mock draft, or it's round 2. It's not like, oh, he doesn't go at 12, he's going to come somewhere else in the, like the 20s. Quarterback's a unique beast where you have Bo Nix. Bo Nix was someone that Scott in his first mock had Bo Nix going to Denver. We've touched on this in every episode. We do not feel like Sean Payton is going into year 2 in this rebuild situation with just Jared Stidham at quarterback, or any other like free agent pluck that they could find that's still kind of hanging around. Bo Nix probably fits his system more than a Michael Penix Jr. Then you also have Michael Penix Jr. going to 13 in DJ's mock. And friend of the show, Nick Costas, has had some smoke there too, saying like he's heard from his Raiders connections that they really like Michael Penix. He's a little bit older. There's some medical concerns, though the medicals came out pretty good at the combine. Connor, what are your thoughts on the quarterback situation? Because like if you look at the books right now, we can get a pretty good number at 5 quarterbacks going in the first round.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of worried. Like I feel like this happens every year with these fringe quarterbacks, and like
Absolutely.
I mean, Nix and Penix to me are just the like epitome of those fringe guys that don't deserve to be round 1 quarterbacks, but get pushed up because there's like serious need. And I think that the Raiders and the Broncos are definitely fit that category. But like, I guess I'm just not ready to believe it until there's more than like, I mean, Jeremiah labeled this his quote chaos mock. So I don't know. I mean, I get it. I understand it. I think the Broncos definitely do need a quarterback. Ben from Capwise over here suggested the same thing. I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback in the first round. Hope he's wrong. I mean, if they draft, Bo Nix here at their first round pick, that would be something. That would be really, really something. So, I mean, I guess it's possible. There's also rumors of like them trading back, but that just doesn't really happen. Like trading back to get your quarterback, like just isn't a thing. I mean, we saw with Daniel Jones where the Giants had 6 and 17 and everyone mocked them to 17. And they're like, nope, we're just going to shoot our shot here at 6 because, I mean, if we miss him, then you're just really, really screwed. So I think that's kind of interesting there specifically with them. But I did want to bring it back. There's a good comment here from Cormac. He said, if the Vikes move to 3 for Mayor Daniels, do you think that the Broncos/Raiders potentially move ahead of the Giants would still make JJ a top 5 option? I actually think that makes sense in some aspects because the Chargers are probably still willing to trade down. I do think the Broncos or Raiders would be interested in moving up to 5 still. I don't know if they have the capital to do so, but the Broncos are fine punting away for as many first-round picks as they have for the future. So would not be surprising to see them do like, I don't know, 2 firsts and maybe another mid-round pick to get up to 5 to get a quarterback. So that's a good point. I actually don't hate that look. It makes me a little bit more interested in like JJ top 5 prices as well down the line there. But yeah, it's a lot of Nix and Penix chat here as well in the chat. Noonan, do you have any Nix or Penix takes? Because I don't know. I'm a little skeptical, I would say.
I mean, I don't see it with Bo Nix. And again, like this becomes like player takes, which is really dangerous. Like it's super irrelevant, to be honest, right? I mean, I was impressed with Michael Penix a little bit. I know he's a little bit of a long delivery and stuff like that, but like I think the accuracy is there. I know he doesn't necessarily seem to fit like what we would expect from a Sean Payton offense, but I don't know. I could see that a little bit to the Raiders. Like, look, yeah, they gave some money to Gardner Minshew. I think they saw enough from Aiden O'Connell last year to be like, yeah, that's probably not the guy and not the answer long term. But like, are you okay with just kind of Minshew, or wouldn't you want like another developmental prospect to get in there? Again, kind of a new situation, new decision makers there with Pierce getting a leash and new GMs and new stuff like that. So like, I could see Penix. That is an easier sell to me. I'm surprised he's not getting a little bit more steam to be in the back end of the first round, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, it's at this point more speculation. I do believe, look, Goss has been plugged into the league in circles for a very long time. So I trust Nick when he has that. And then when it's kind of validated with a prominent mock like DJ, that's definitely perks my interest a little bit, and just interested to see if there's anything that comes of that here over the next couple of weeks. PR, any thoughts on these quarterbacks?
Yeah, and I mean, like Connor said, this is just a conversation we have like every single year, and it is March, and like with the mocks, you really want to pay attention to like if the guys we trust are mocking guys like Knicks and Penix to the same teams, it's definitely worth something. And if it's a different team for each, then it's not going to be worth something as much. And
Yeah, that's a good point.
putting either of those guys at like 12 or 13 to me means more than kind of just throwing a late round quarterback into the 20s. But like I don't buy it yet. I really don't. It feels like these guys never go in the first round and that we're always debating. But with Costos, then with the Jeremiah mock, it definitely is, I guess, worth something. But they really just don't have a lot to talk about right now. And if we get closer and they continue to do it, sure. But if I'm making a mock right now, I'm not putting Knicks or Penix in the first round, even though the last couple of days I've been seeing more and more of one of those two in the first round. And Pierce, to me, like I don't think Pierce has a very long leash whatsoever. Like to me, I think if they don't do well this year, Davis is probably going to move on from him. Like I think he was kind of like forced to make this move after he screwed up the last one with that guy who's the Packers coach. I can't even pronounce his first and last name, but if anything, like his leash is short and drafting a quarterback might lengthen it a little. And I feel like every team Minshew has signed with, they've drafted a quarterback the last couple of years. Like the Eagles, they drafted Jalen. Colts, they drafted Richardson. But
yeah, I'm with you. I want to see a little bit more. I want to get a little bit more info there too. Connor Jeff in the chat mentioned too about the Jets losing Bryce Huff. What about Verse or Dallas Turner to replace them? They drafted Will McDonald in the middle of the first round last year and used him like for a quarter of the snaps. That increased later in the season. I think they're probably okay giving Will McDonald a little bit of a longer leash, and I don't think they necessarily feel like Huff is a short-term replacement need necessarily. And they like to rotate bodies in there as well. And, so maybe, but that's probably a day 2, day 3 pick then versus, what you want to do with Rodgers in this window.
Yeah, I mean, they have like 1 to 2 years. I mean, you have to be drafting guys that are like immediate impact players. And the only positions that's possible at is, I mean, you could make a case for O-line, but they just signed their O-line. You could make a case for wideout. You definitely don't want to draft an O-lineman who's sitting. Like that just doesn't even make sense. Tight end, like maybe, again, it just has to be a special player. And I think Bauer is special enough, so it makes sense. But I guess we'll see. I don't know. I'm interested I hope that we get some like rumors out of New York because I would love some direction here. It felt pretty clear cut heading into free agency. Again, minus 350 O-line, and then they added so many guys. Like, I just don't really know what they're going to do.
Yeah, circling back to some of the other stuff in the top 10 that I think news is relevant. We'd love to get your guys' thoughts. Where I think now it becomes easier. I thought there was a pretty good debate and a pretty good reason why the Titans maybe wouldn't go offensive tackle or offensive line with the 7th pick, but giving an absolute massive bag to Calvin Ridley makes it feel like an offensive tackle makes a ton of sense. We don't really feel like anyone else is. Yeah. So any value on Titans to take an offensive lineman at minus 300 here. Everyone now it's like it's alt. My question was that also, does anyone think, or we feel that there's any non-alt first O-line stuff that you think is worth discussing VR?
No, I would say no, but like FanDuel drafted picks 1 through 8. I want to say 2 nights ago. And immediately I saw 7 and it was like plus 125. I bet that to go number 7 right away. And then I also bet Dallas Turner to go number 8, which was plus 300 at the time. Both of them got destroyed. Alt was all the way up to minus 200 at one point, but it reset and came back. And now I think it's even odds, and alt at 7 just feels as close to automatic as it can be in March. Things can change, but I mean, if that got posted again today at even odds, I would probably bet it again as well. Alt at 7 is just, unless I guess there's a trade, like I don't see any other way. And Connor's bet was great, and I don't know if we just jinxed it, but we probably did. And it seemed like it was going to work out too, and it took an unexpected turn for sure. But alt at 7, I think, would be a better bet at even odds than laying minus 300 because you would need the Chargers to go O-line at 5 for alt not to be the first offensive lineman. I guess the Chargers are just the only offensive line, maybe the Giants. But everything you're hearing is Giants are wide receiver, quarterback, Chargers are either trade out and take an offensive lineman, but I don't think they're going to take an offensive lineman at 5.
Yeah, where are you at, Connor? You had, tried to make a splash with the defensive ends, or a little bit of an off, big number, and I thought it was a viable play with the Titans. It looks a little bit less likely, but hey, we'll see. Wait until they go to the podium. You never know, right?
It's not over till it's over, baby. No, but I mean, it's pretty much over. I mean, we're like, on the last leg, we're wobbling a little bit, ready to be knocked out by a nice Joe Alt sucker punch there, at the end. But yeah, I kind of think it's him. I've been waiting to hedge. Maybe I think that Alt is probably a good look. We have Ryan Terrell chiming in. JC Latham, pick 7, 22-1. Like, I guess I would just love more specific Joe Alt to Titans love. Like, I mean, we all know they're going to, they need an offensive, they need a left tackle. But is that specifically Alt? Is that any of the other guys? I mean, there's 10.
No, I don't hate that Latham. Latham's definitely a guy you kind of see randomly, but noteworthy pop into the top 10, specifically at 5. That I don't know if it was Jeremiah's last mock or what, but it was just
I think it was Kuiper had him 5 a couple mocks.
There were
ago.
some random ass Lathams in the top 5 that I was like, what is it was just noteworthy.
Yeah.
And then Fuaga was the one guy to the Chargers that I thought was worth a first offensive lineman taken, really based off of Schrager's love for him last week. But yeah, Latham would be the only guy I could see based off in March right now. I'm not betting Latham 22-1 in March, but if I was, that would probably be the one.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I just don't know if I'm ready to I don't know. I know that there will be a good hedging opportunity for one of these guys or two of these guys based on where we're at our position with the 11-1 on the D line or edge, but I'm just not sure if it's right now. Maybe I'm losing value, maybe I'm losing opportunity. Yeah, so I don't know.
Again, it's March. Yesterday I was ready to bet, or 2 days ago I was ready to bet Bengals O-line. I thought that was who was that? Goodberry. He's Bengals drafting O-line in blood. And I was ready, and thankfully I didn't, because and I'd like to hear your guys' opinions on it. But then they went and signed, was it Trent Brown or the other massive guy?
Yeah, Trent Brown from the Pats. Yeah.
Which just I don't know if Trent Brown totally takes them out, given how many good tackles there are. I would like to see the odds come down and make it more bettable, but figuring out whether Trent Brown changes their plans is one of the more interesting things that happened over the last week as well for me.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they knew that they were losing Jonah Williams. It feels like it, especially knowing that they, lost another. Hey, Scott, welcome to the show, man. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, fellas?
How are you, man? You set up, good to go? Scott is live in sports. He's in Vegas. He's doing his thing. He's got you look like a dude ready to talk about sports betting, draft betting. This is just the people put that in the green screen behind them, but no, you're ready to rock and roll.
Live at the Station Sportsbook.
Love it. I'd love to get your thoughts. We were just touching on Bengals offensive line. Is that a priority now after the Trent Brown signing? VR mentioned, Goodberry mentioning that you could put that in blood. Any thoughts on Bengals offensive line stuff?
I think it's still an option. You have to look at it and see what they're going to do. But the other kind of pivot, I would say, for the Bengals seems to be defensive line. I think, Hubbard's been around for a while. I think they're going to be looking to add maybe to the interior is what I like. Right now, I think, a week ago, saying offensive line was a lock, I think was absolutely correct. But, as things change, as signings happen, you have to pivot and start to look at other things. I think Brown is more than capable to go ahead and fill that spot. But I would actually start to look at pivoting towards defensive line now.
Ooh. We're looking at -165 right now for offensive linemen still with the Bengals.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
I mean, it was -200 yesterday on DraftKings, so I guess it came down a little.
Yeah, I think wide receiver 4-1, defensive line / edge, that you get both of those at 450. I think is interesting there as well. I mean, they're DJ Reader going to Detroit is very interesting. They need to figure out what they're going to do there internally. They're losing some other guys that took a handful of snaps last year. BJ Hill, also their other main cog in the middle in the last year of his deal. And we knew what happened last year. I mean, what did we do in props last year? Like the Bengals defense was a disaster, especially like running backs could get whatever they wanted against them. And so, yeah, it's definitely a need. That's a spot where like you could sell me on like, Byron Murphy still being around as an internal cog. If he's there, that would make a ton of sense. I think that that's both like a value based off of where maybe he should go and fits a team need. And that's kind of what we're always trying to do, right? It's like it's not always best player available. It's kind of a marriage of best player and team need. And I think that that's a really good one too. And we're getting pretty nice odds. So that's definitely something I want to do a little bit more research. I'm surprised that we're still hanging out at minus 165 there too. Without going too long, Scott, I want to get your thoughts on any of this like news that's happened in the last couple of days. I'll let you kind of cherry pick. We had the trade with the Vikings and Texans that you can kick around if you want to have your thoughts there. Some of the stuff that the Jets have done, whether it's offensive lineman additions, Mike Williams additions, what do you think they do there at the top? What are your thoughts on some of those pieces?
I think specifically when we start talking about Minnesota, I think Minnesota has done everything they can to put themselves in position to trade up and get JJ McCarthy. You've had the rumors out there that they're going to go ahead and make a move. Drake May's probably at the top of their list from what I understand. So if they could get one of those first three teams to kind of budge, they might have an outside shot at that. But I tend to think it's going to be JJ McCarthy here within, whenever they do make the trade, whether that be at 4 or at 5. I tend to lean a little bit more towards it being with the Chargers rather than the Cardinals. But there are rumors out there that the Cardinals are willing to move out. And really, it's just going to be about getting in front of the Giants is what I think. I don't think that Denver's going to have enough ammo to move up and kind of play the blocker. So I think Minnesota getting McCarthy, and when you're doing a mock draft, however you decide to slot that, whether it be at 4 or 5, or if, final mock drafts where you don't even have a trade, you're just slotting the player to the team. I think that's what's going to make the most sense based upon the information we have right now. And specifically when it comes to the Jets, you're starting to hear a little bit of rumor about possibly being a quarterback. I just tend to think that they're overall all in on Aaron Rodgers in this 1 year, and possibly, maybe they can stretch it into 2 years. But, I think what they've done along the offensive line gives them some flexibility to take the best player available, whether that be a Brock Bowers who slides down, whether a wide receiver drops down, whatever the case may be. I think they've done a solid job of solidifying themselves. And I think they're in a position where they have to go all in this year. I don't think that coaching staff and that front office is on steady footing based upon the way some things have played out, specifically allowing Aaron Rodgers to dictate a lot of things, bringing in Hackett as the offensive coordinator. Those things just have not panned out. I think they have too much talent on the defensive side of the ball to go ahead and play it safe and just rely on what they have. So I think the Jets could possibly move up a few spots, but I think they're in a good position just to stay where they're at and take best player.
Yeah, that's I agree. I mean, would it be a real interesting flex for them to just go corner at 10 and stay there, and it'd be interesting for the future, but not necessarily a great win now move necessarily. But yeah, we'll wait and see what happens there. Connor, are there any other like specific betting market type stuff that you want to touch on in terms of like things that have come out in the last couple of days, things you're waiting to see? The one I wanted to kind of get into, and I'm trying to look around here around like, whether it's first defensive player off the board, first cornerback off the board, whereas like right now it feels like I'm just trying to look at VR's thing too. Like everyone is just putting, 8 Dallas Turner has been like just a rock solid, like 90% of the last handful of mocks. Any reason to think that Dallas Turner is not the first defensive player off the board or anything else with the cornerbacks in particular?
Ben Solak had a fun mock like late last week where he had Quinyon Mitchell at 8, first defensive player off the board, I believe.
Look, they lost to Kuda. I don't hate it. I mean, that could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't know. I mean, I think it's Dallas Turner probably, but like, should he be minus 225? I don't know. I mean, I popped a little bit at Fanatics when it was like minus 110 for whatever the limit was, which was like $100. So, it wasn't worth talking about too much. So I don't know. I think the Quinyon Mitchell is interesting there. I can't really see it being a Jared Verse or Terrion Arnold. So I think it's kind of between Mitchell and Turner here, in my opinion, for kind of the first defensive player specifically. Also, too, I want to add on the Bengals thing here. Dane, Dane from the chat here asked Joe Goodberry again, like a couple hours ago, if they still go line with their first pick, and he said he still thinks so. So, I mean, I don't know if he's ready to, slice his hand open and write in blood anymore, but I guess we should ask him what type of ink he's thinking about with, writing no line there for the first round. But noteworthy, I think, probably why it's still minus 160. I mean, there's still some optimism from one of the best Bengals. I don't really know what Joe Goodberry is. He's not really a beat reporter. He was like a fan reporter, but I don't really. What would you call him?
I think he was like an SB Nation Bengals.
Was he?
We used to call them bloggers. I don't know if we do that anymore.
That's yeah. I don't know. We don't use that.
Sounds
like
disrespectful.
He's the Bengals to go to, though.
Yeah,
at least for me.
Yeah, 100%. He's good info. I just don't really know. I think he writes a couple articles here and there. I guess blogger is probably the right term. I don't know, but that's disrespectful because he's more accurate than blogger.
I don't mean it to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to summarize it. But yeah, let me be fair. Like Trent Brown wasn't very good last year. He missed a bunch of time. So like you're not necessarily plugging in a guy that you can expect to play every single snap. So it's fair. I understand, and that's why the market's priced where it is.
You know what I do want to talk about? So Scott is at Station Sportsbook. Station Sportsbook has 3 over-unders available right now for players. I'd love to just talk about those because, I mean, I don't know what they're going to be posted at for domestics, but they're kind of fun ones. So we have Dallas Turner, 8.5 right now is his over-under. The under is minus 150, 8.5.
Okay.
I mean, you're kind of only leaving yourself, in my opinion, one out, which is 8. So I'm not ready to lay minus 150 on that, in my opinion. I think that's a little bit tough. I guess we can start there. Scott, any Dallas Turner thoughts on any 8.5 there?
Well, I mean, you have an outside shot with Tennessee possibly, but I mean, 8.5. That's to me, it's accurately lined. I mean, it's what you're going to be looking at where it's very limited out. So I think for that price, it's just not there yet to go ahead and play. I would tend to just no bet that and see if that line possibly moves with more information coming out closer to the draft.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then we have another one here that I think VR is maybe talked about here. It's Latu over under 21.5. Over is minus 150. Under is minus or plus 120. VR, any thoughts on him? Because we've gotten pretty mixed reports on him because he medically retired, I think, at one point already. So,
yeah, I mean, they posted it at like 20.5 at first, and now it's 21.5, which everything you're hearing about him medically since the combine has been pretty negative. And I mean, Charlie Campbell, I think, even tweeted something out I think it was last week that a lot of teams have them off their board, and he might not even go in the first. So right now, it would be an over or nothing, and let it continue to get bet up. And if we get closer and you don't believe it, then bet the under. Like I wouldn't bet the under now. I don't think there's anything that we can get now that would make me want to bet that under. And I would rather, like, we don't know enough for me to touch it right now. I would just let it keep getting higher based off these medical reports that keep coming out. And then if anything, bet the under, but it would be an over now or wait and not bet it or bet the under later. But he's definitely trending in the wrong direction off of medical red flags.
Yeah, Noonan, are you a Latu guy? Are you?
Dude, have you watched this kid? Have you watched anything of this kid?
He's a beast. Like without those medical red flags, you would jam this under if there was
he's awesome
medical red flags.
1,000%. Like he came back pretty clean. The medicals came back clean. It was a neck thing that he retired, and then he transferred to UCLA, and then absolutely balled out. like run. The tape's better than Dallas Turner. Turner's a freak athlete, though. I mean, like freakish athlete. So I get it. He will be off the board for some teams, and that's okay. It only takes one. Just takes one, right? So I think VR's the way he summed it up is perfect. There's no need to do anything with that now. Let's see if there's any sort of positive news that would come back in. If the negative stuff continues, it's probably an over or nothing. I just think there's a really good chance that someone takes a shot and gets rewarded with a really good football player, because the team didn't want to take a risk. So again, that's probably more of a football take than a draft betting take. I think VR's draft betting take on that is completely spot on. Like there's no reason to jump on that now because we think he's really good at football. Like that doesn't matter at all. So, but I think he's awesome. So yeah, I hope he I hope he just tumbles down the board and I just hope he doesn't go to the Ravens. Like, I'll be so mad if he goes. The Ravens do it every single year. There's just a dude that falls, and you're like, why is he still available? And the Ravens take him, and he ends up being the guy that everyone thinks he's going to be. I'm just kind of tired of that. So I hope he doesn't. The Ravens don't take him at 30. They need defensive ends as well, which is another reason that's slightly terrifying to me. But yeah, he's really good.
Yeah, I think as we're talking about it quick, like Caesars posted conference over-unders. And then offense and defense over-unders, and then DraftKings has offense, defense, and positional over-unders, which most of them feel pretty spot on. The ones that I'm like definitely eyeing are offensive line over 9.5, which is insane. SEC at 10.5 has me very interested right now. In the under at the current moment, like I'm not betting it, but it's trending that way. And then offensive players at 20.5. Right now I have it at 21 with it would like quarterbacks. Nix and Penix probably send this over, but I'm not betting the quarterback over. So I guess that eliminates that, but all the conferences are pretty spot on. The biggest difference that I'm seeing on my sheet would be SEC. And then the only over would be potentially the Pac-12 over 6.5, but they all seem pretty well aligned, which I found a DraftKings guy buying my sheet last week and I booted him and refunded him.
Did you? That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good.
Him. I had some like random guy with the DraftKings email request access. And I was like, how the hell could you request access? Like someone had to have sent you the link.
Yeah,
that bought it. So then I literally went through every single person who bought it and cross-referenced them with LinkedIn and got them.
Oh, what a story. That's incredible.
I love the grind. That's got him.
You have to protect draft betting.
1000%. Dude, again, like doing the absolute Lord's work here, VR, making sure that these markets stay up for us. That's great. Connor, I think you said you had 3. That was 2 of the over-unders for that Scott has at his book.
Yeah, and then the last one was Joe Alt, over under 7.5. Over is plus 140. Under a 7.5 is minus 170. I think you're basically looking at the 2 outs being either 5 or 7, basically. Personally, it's kind of just a little bit rich because you're better off taking Alt, I think, exact to 7. Because the more that we get closer, I think that the Chargers are going to trade out. If they don't trade out, then they'll be left with Marvin Harrison Jr. If they pick Joe Alt over Marvin Harrison Jr., that seems like war crimes there. But Scott, any thoughts there on Alt or Latu too? And I think you had something there as well.
Yeah, to me, the thought process on Alt there is spot on. I think when you start looking at him, being under, I don't see it. So I don't know that either of those lines. As far as Latu, I tend to think it's going to be over. I think there are some teams out there that have him above Jared Verse as far as like the profile and what he has done on the field. It's all about the medicals. That's things that we don't have access to. But even with the medicals, you're hearing rumors and things leaked out that he has that the medicals didn't come back clean. Versus somebody like Michael Penix, where Penix had some medical issues, and you're starting to get reports from the combine that Penix's medicals came back rather clean. So with that, I think you could see Latu go down. The one team that I kind of like the fit for Latu is at 19 with the Rams. But if it's not him, if it's not there at 19 with the Rams, I would definitely see him falling below that 21 and a half spot. So as of right now, I like the over, but I don't think it's anything that you have to make a move on at this point in time.
I think Jeremiah had him at 19, and someone else did too. Maybe Charlie Campbell, someone like that. It was there's two people that had him exactly at 19. So that makes sense. And then there's also one more market that I think is interesting that we touched on a little bit: Quinion Mitchell versus Terrion Arnold draft position. Mitchell right now minus 105, Arnold minus 125. I know this opened with Arnold as a much bigger favorite. It's kind of gotten bet down a little bit, but I don't know, could be still a little bit of value there on the bone. I mean, any Mitchell takes, Noonan?
I like it. I mean, you start to see where he's going in these mocks. You're seeing a little bit more of that. It's consistently Jeremiah and Kuiper, 15 to the Colts. I had that as well in my mock a couple weeks ago. We've talked about how Chris Ballard in Indy is a traits-based drafter, especially early. They want freakish athletes, and like Quinion Mitchell is that guy. I know Tyrion Arnold is not like a terrible athlete as well, but Mitchell makes a ton of sense. That's why I also think like Brian Thomas could be in play for them as well with the Colts. And the Colts are pretty interesting. I think the Colts are 115 plus 115 on DraftKings to take a corner. They're plus 330 to take a wide receiver. I think those are pretty interesting markets to look at. But I mean, I'd lean Mitchell. I think there's a lot of steam there that I think makes a ton of sense. It's hard to evaluate a guy who plays at Toledo that doesn't play in the SEC like Arnold did. But Mitchell did 2 years ago play against Marvin Harrison Jr. and showed up pretty well. Just balled out man on him. And that was, there's a clip of Harrison catching a touchdown pass, which is like an elite Harrison clip. Because he just like the toe drag in the corner was amazing. But like Mitchell was up in his stuff. So I think you're going to continue to see the more teams kind of get him in and his pro day stuff. Maybe he can add to what some of the stuff he did in the combine. I don't know, just say minus 105, plus 105. I'd probably lean that way. Not necessarily bettable now, but I think that the steam that's happened makes sense.
Yeah, and per VR's sheet, it looks like with all the newest mocks, like they're almost dead even. I think there's a slight lean at this point to Mitchell, which was not the case like a couple of weeks ago, in terms of you just like averaged out all the positions of where people have selected them. So yeah, it's not super bettable right now, but any thoughts, VR?
With the right now, I mean, I can't right now. The mocks are there's a dangerous consensus going on right now, like to a level that I don't think I can remember seeing. Like right now, there's like 34 guys being drafted in the first round out of like the 30 mocks that I look at, 30 plus, give or take. Like there's no variance. It's the consensus is crazy, which if it pans out accurate, that's great for us, but it is extremely dangerous. Which like Jackson Powers Johnson, I think it was Nick Carrasco, our friend, pointed out yesterday that it was notable that Jeremiah and Kuiper, neither of them had him in the first round. And Jeremiah has never had him in the first round yet out of the 4 that he's done.
Kuiper has
every single mock right now has Jackson Powers Johnson, 100%, other than those 2 in the first round. So it's the same 34 guys that are really being mocked. Like I would love some variance, like 40 guys usually is like the sweet spot. But outside of once you get to like the 35th guy on my sheet, then the first round percentages get to like 15, 10 out of like the 30 that I track. So the copycat consensus, it is March, which is usually when you start to see this. And hopefully we get a little bit more variance as we get closer, but it's scary. But at the same time, if it works out this way, it should be pretty profitable at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, the issue is that you have 2 positions that are just like that are normally in the mix that are
just to piggyback off of Jackson Power Johnson. Some of the information that I've been chasing down specifically because Pittsburgh's a team that's been kind of linked to him a little bit. Everybody I've talked to in Pittsburgh says that it's much too early to draft Jackson Power Johnson for them there at 20. And so at least Pittsburgh evaluation on him thinks that he's not going to be a player that's in that 20 to 25 range, that if he is drafted, it's going to be in those back, 6 to 7 picks of the first round and possibly out of the first round. So a lot of what you're seeing coming out of Jeremiah and Kuiper aligns with some of the other information that I'm getting from people that are connected with the front offices of specifically Pittsburgh.
That definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
I wanted to add real quick, like there's 2 positions that are just like totally, I mean, not even in play this year, which is like running back and safety, which normally we get like, 1 or 2 of each, generally at least like kind of close. And we just have 0 of each. And so if 0 each of those, like there's not that many, I guess there are the 2, Penix or Knicks, but they're all mocked like in the top 15. Like there's not really anyone mocking them like in the late half because none of those teams are really a threat to pick a quarterback, at least seems right now. So I don't know. I think that's probably lends to some of the less in volatility, but I'm sure, as we get close to the draft, we're going to hear random names kind of creep up there into that top 32. At least, maybe not hopefully, but I don't know. I'd love a little bit more mix up to some of this.
Yeah, the back half of the draft is filled. There's like extreme depth at 3 positions, and it is loaded with teams that need 2 of those 3 positions. You have a ton of offensive linemen still to go. You have a ton of wide receivers, and then there's defensive linemen / edge rushers, or a handful mix of those guys, interior defensive linemen. But like all of these, like multiple needs, kind of where guys are expected to go as well. So it becomes kind of like parsing through. Is there any free agents scuffles that are coming up in the next couple of weeks that could change these things, or any of the news that we can hope kind of pinpoint where that is, because that'll kind of help shape what VR is talking about, where there's just a ton of consensus. It's very easy to like not pick this team to go corner in this mock. We're going to give them a receiver this time, but then that corner is still going to go within like 2 or 3 picks because there's a bunch of other teams that need them as well. So it's just very, very interesting the way this dynamic is shifting too. How about some of the back end corners or receivers? Some of these guys too are offensive line in those 3 positions that I'm talking about. Are there any of those guys that you think VR that are like have made a name for themselves or kind of coming up in your sheet that are a little bit more consistent? Obviously, coming out of the combine, we had the buzz out of the Texas guys, with Worthy, AD Mitchell, both running really well. Teams want to like put those guys in the back end. The more you hear about, like, say a Graham Barton, who fits a ton of needs, who could play a bunch of positions along the offensive line, like he seems to fit a bunch of teams. Anything kind of at the bottom half that you're feeling a little bit more stronger about as we kind of get closer?
I mean, every single mock has the Bills and the Chiefs taking a wide receiver, which everyone's had Xavier Worthy to the Chiefs at 32, which I think was in Jeremiah's mock. He kind of went against that and went Adonde Mitchell for the reason of the Chiefs signing Hollywood Brown. But like when there's such a high consensus this late, like you kind of want to go against the grain, at least in terms of like betting team to position. But I mean, Lassiter he's kind of falling after, I think he ran like 4.6 at his pro day last week. But Michael Hall is one guy that I'm kind of keeping an eye out. Forget who the guy was. It was the Senior Bowl guy. Who's the Senior Bowl expert on Twitter? I forget whatever his name is, but
Nagy.
Michael Hall, who's the
Nagy.
Yeah, I think so. The D-line out of Ohio State. He's like one guy I think teams are a lot higher on than the media. But really, like, there's such a consensus. It's like tough to see anyone rising like at all. It feels like everyone's falling because the consensus is so strong right now. But if Nix and Penix go in the first round, if one of them or 2, figuring out who the guys are going to fall out, I think it's great because they could take 2 spots up, and guys like maybe that would put offensive line under 9.5 instead of over if those quarterbacks go. But I think free agency is somewhat buttoned up. I don't know how many guys are left that could really make a difference, but Braden Fisk was the other guy that had a fantastic combine that's definitely rising. It feels like the D-line, like Chris Jensen, Braden Fisk, are kind of rising. I mean, I think Walter updated his mock yesterday, and he had TJ Tampa, who I have no idea who he is, out of Iowa, and he had Roger Rosengarten, which is a tackle from Washington, which was the first time I've heard of him as well. And I expect both of those guys probably to be in his mock for the next month or so. But Walter and Charlie are the 2 guys that definitely throw darts on the randoms. And honestly, you have to take it for something because they're the best at this for sure. And Zach Frazier, he's another guy that Frazier is definitely rising big time, who is I think guard from West Virginia. I don't know if he's guard or center, but Zach Frazier I'm seeing a ton of now.
Yeah, the darts are also like a chance to, just kind of, pinpoint a guy that you like and just want to say, hey, I want to be early on this guy. And just kind of like, hey, I'm going to use a March mock to kind of, flag plant a guy that you think is pretty interesting. Scott, how do you feel about the Chiefs? The Chiefs, with obviously the Hollywood Brown signing, still a positional need at wide receiver there on DraftKings -120 to take a wide receiver with the first pick. I think offensive line is still a need there as well. It's +220. Corner, because you're still hearing a lot of like L'Jarius Sneed movements. Obviously, they've drafted a ton of depth behind him in the last couple of years. That's why they're maybe willing to move on. But hey, like there's some corners that could be available there too. along with defensive line and edge. I think like all plus money lines there on the Chiefs, I think are interesting too. Not necessarily something bettable at this point, but what are your thoughts on the Chiefs and, just the consensus of putting a wide receiver there?
Yeah, I don't think it's as locked in as what a lot of people think. And even before the Hollywood Brown signing, the players that I've heard heavily connected to the Chiefs are actually at offensive tackle, and that would be Jordan Morgan and then the other tackle from BYU, Kingsley Suamataia, however you say his last name. I've been told that if either of those two players were there at 32, that the Chiefs would pull the trigger and not pass on them. So those are two players that I would keep an eye on. A little bit of pushback. Zach Frazier is a guy who you've seen rising in a lot of mock drafts, but some of the scouting community that I've talked to and that I've touched base with don't believe that he's a first-round talent. They think that he is skilled, but that's particularly on the interior, it's a little bit of a weaker class, and that what he's put out there on film would not make him, be a first-round talent. And then you also talk about the value of drafting a center there in the first round. So he's a guy, while he's rising, and you're going to see him in a lot of mock drafts, I don't project him going into the first round, and I don't think any of my mocks will have him there.
Interesting. Yeah. Connor, I could do this all day, but we're pushing an hour here. Anything that you want to wrap up with as we shut down shop?
I know. So we could do this for another hour if we really wanted to.
For
but
sure.
no, okay. So Scott's comments there. Chiefs right now plus 220 to draft an offensive lineman, minus 120 to draft a wideout. I mean, if you're saying that they're going to pick one of Kingsley or Jordan Morgan if they're there, I mean, one of them's going to be there. It's like, and I also think there's a chance that Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell all go before the Chiefs pick. Like, I think that's very much the range of outcomes. So are they going to pick like a Lad McConkey or Keon Coleman or someone like that? I think they might probably prefer to go offensive line. So could be some value there. Also, if you're saying that if we assume that one of those guys is picked, that puts VR as over 9.5 linemen as well, because like they're kind of the 10th guy right there. Because looking at like Alt Fuaga, Fashanu, Troy Fatuanu, JC Latham, Mims, Powers Johnson, that's, I guess, maybe a little bit more skeptical than we thought originally. But Barton and Guyton seem pretty safely on the edge right now. We're looking 87%, 91% in round one, and then Morgan and Kingsley are the two fringe guys. So. But again, if you're getting one of those guys, like you're very likely to be hitting over 9.5.
Yeah. VR, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
I think I'm good.
Love it. Scott, anything in closing? We missed you for a little bit, but floor is yours if you want to take us home with any final thoughts.
Yeah, man, a little bit busy out here in Vegas this week with some fights coming up this week for UFC. Had my times a little bit mixed up, but look, everything's fluid right now. And really, I think right now where you're at as far as the market with what VR said with the 34 or so players that kind of are falling in that range, you're going to have to do a little bit more line shopping this year than what you've probably done in the past. I think you're going to have to find the book that gives you a few extra points here and there in some positions, but some of these players that are currently being mocked in the first round, I think you have to start to play out scenarios where they're going to fall, and that's Latu, and it's Powers Johnson, and even Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think what you're going to end up seeing late there in the first round, you're going to see some teams that are in the second round end up moving into those last few picks, either to grab that last offensive tackle that they have in a tier, or to grab that quarterback that they didn't get, but looking at Denver in particular. But I think those are going to be the moves that kind of push some of these players down the boards and potentially out of the first round. So whenever you're looking at some of the bets and some of the lines that you have out there right now, start to consider those things, play out some of the different scenarios that you could see happening, specifically with those teams that are in the first 7 or so picks in the second round, because those are going to be the teams that likely move up into the late first round to kind of change things.
Love it. Sorry, Jeff, no kickers, no kicker talk. No first round kickers going by. This is a good way to get fired, is to take a place kicker in the first round. So appreciate everyone hanging out. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe before you take off. Come back for next week's show. These continue to get better as we go on. We get more information. We'll ramp up. We'll start doing more shows as we get closer and closer. Like I said, I just happened to look at the time. I saw we were already in an hour. I had 3 more questions to ask. So we can talk about this stuff all day long. Like I said, these are three of the smartest people to talk about this and listen to. So just happy to be able to bring this to you guys all season long. So for VR, for Scott, for Connor, I'm Ryan. We'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.